sanctioned us, took away our privileges to use the library for a year. We did a lot of protests. We were out in front of the library. We wrote letters and phone calls. We came to all the meetings. We ran for office on the library board. And eventually what they did was rescind their ban. So we have a victory. And which is very rare during this period. But if you fight, you can win. But one of the things, as a result of all of that, is they make it mandatory that when we have a program in this room, we read the following. So let me do that before we start, and while the woman is looking for a microphone that we can put here and get to hear Jody, not just see her. So the mandatory thing that we have to read is, this program is neither sponsored by nor affiliated with the Bethlehem Public Library. The viewpoints of any speakers are solely those of the speaker and not the library, the library staff, or the library board of trustees. Please notice the emergency exits in the room. Access to the emergency exits must be maintained at all times. No person may use any part of the library or the library grounds to engage in any activity that includes the exchange of money or in the marketing of goods or services. The room must be vacated by the scheduled time of 8:45 p.m. Library staff and any member of the library board of trustees shall have access to the room at all times. Library staff have the authority to interrupt, to end the event, or to direct the designated users to end the event if the parameters of the meeting room access and use policy or other library policies are not upheld. So let's uphold the policies of the library, and we're in good stead. I don't want to, I was hoping Jody could start, but maybe instead, while they're looking for the microphone that we could put right up to the computer, because for some reason we can't go through the room sound system right now. So I think maybe we'll go in the reverse order that I thought would be a good order, and do it that way. Jody very kindly has agreed to speak. Jody Dean, I think she's back now, but she was down in Venezuela as an observer of the recent elections. And that's another topic which would be great for us to talk about, but that's for another day. So I'm going to put Kathy on the spot and introduce Kathy Manley. Now, Kathy is someone that most of us know. She's a lawyer from the area, does a lot of civil rights cases, civil liberties cases. She's the vice president of the Capital District, New York Civil Liberties Union. She's the legal director for the Center for Civil Liberties. Center for Civil Liberties is a very...
Legal director of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms.
Coalition for Civil Freedoms, sorry. I should know that because my own organization, UNAC, is part of it. And I said it wrong. It was an organization started by Sami Alarian, who during the attacks on the civil liberties of Muslims when the war on Iraq started, and they called it a war against terrorism, he was arrested along with many, many others, including people from his capital district who some of us came to their defense, including Kathy, and many were put in jail. There's still a Muslim jail called the Communication Management Unit. After they realized there was only Muslims in there, stringent place, they brought some other people in there, but it's still mostly Muslims, and that's where the Imam ref from this area was imprisoned for a while after his defense. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, let her speak. By that time, hopefully, we will have a microphone and we can get Jody to speak. And I will do this so that Jody can see Kathy a little bit better.
Oh, Jody's remote?
Jody's remote. She's up there.
All right. All right.
So here's Kathy.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. So I'm an attorney. I'm a criminal defense attorney, mainly an appeals attorney. And I just want to talk about how there's very clearly a Muslim and particularly Palestinian exception when it comes to the First Amendment and free speech in this country. And this has been true, especially with regard to Palestinians, since the 1970s, even pre-9/11, and it got a lot worse after 9/11, and then again after October 7th. So I got involved in all this stuff, as Joe kind of mentioned, when myself and Steve Downs started representing Yassin Aref, who's an imam in Albany, who was entrapped in a very unfair FBI sting operation. And I won't go to all of that, but they were totally innocent and railroaded post 9/11. The trial was in 2006, and they were each sentenced to 15 years. They're out now, but it was a horrible thing that they had to go through, and the whole community had to go through. And after that, we started looking into other cases, mainly post 9/11, and we started seeing a pattern of and then in 2010, we were involved in the founding of the Coalition for Civil Freedoms by a Palestinian political prisoner, Sami al-Arian, when he was under house arrest, and he has a whole case. He's living in Turkey now, and he's doing well, but he got acquitted mainly in his case. But that was another very unfair prosecution, and he brought together all of us around the country to form the Coalition for Civil Freedoms. And so we advocate for mainly Muslims that are caught up in these very unfair cases. And Steve Downs here came up with the term preemptive prosecution, which describes what we were seeing when we looked at these cases, which was prosecutions of Muslims who hadn't actually committed any crimes, for the most part, but were targeted in sting operations or on vague conspiracy or material support charges without any evidence to support violence even. And so I want to talk a little bit about the history of the material support laws, and it relates to the First Amendment and Palestinians. It's no surprise to see Palestinians and their supporters targeted for material support prosecutions. It was actually the ADL and similar groups who pushed for these laws to be passed in the first place. And there was a report last February by the Center for Constitutional Rights and Palestine Legal called Anti-Palestinian at the Core: The Origins and Growing Danger of U.S. Anti-Terrorism Law. And it shows that this was happening as far back as 1969. In the 70s, Zionist groups successfully pushed for the passage of laws banning aid to governments which hosted or supported Palestinian resistance groups. And in 1979, there was a law passed saying that the Secretary of State could designate countries as state sponsors of terrorism. In 1987, during the first Intifada, Congress designated the PLO as a terrorist organization and created an overall list of, quote, foreign terrorist organizations, and many of them were Palestinian groups, and then many other Muslim groups were added. So most of them, if you look at the list, you see so many Muslim groups on there still today. And then the actual material support laws that we're dealing with now, after the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, which of course was a domestic, like, white nationalist group where a couple of guys, right, Timothy McVeigh and that other guy. At first it was blamed on Muslims, and there was this outcry against Muslims, but then they found out no, it had nothing to do with Muslims. But there was still, as a result of that, this push to pass material support laws aimed at Muslims and not applying to domestic white nationalist groups at all. And the ADL was very involved in that push, specifically arguing that this was needed to prevent Hamas from fundraising in the U.S. So the material support laws say that anybody who in any way coordinates with one of the groups on this list, and the list is, you know, there's so many armed groups in the world, but the list is very political. It has to do with who the U.S. likes and doesn't like, and particularly, as I said, a lot of Palestinian groups on it and other Muslim groups. So anybody who supports that group in any way, even if it's to try to support them to work out their differences peacefully, is guilty of material support to terrorism. So back in 1998, there was a group called the Humanitarian Law Project. That was a group that worked with different groups that were involved in armed conflict in the world and tried to get them to negotiate their grievances peacefully through the UN or other ways of doing that. And they thought, well, you know, this law can't apply to us, right? We're trying to prevent war, we're trying to prevent violence. And so they filed a lawsuit saying that the law shouldn't apply to people who were doing things like that. So from 1998, and then 9/11 happened, this case went through the courts and went through the courts, and it didn't get to the Supreme Court until 2010. And in 2010, the Supreme Court said, you can definitely be charged with material support for trying to help these groups resolve their differences peacefully. It doesn't matter if you're trying to be peaceful. So any kind of speech, if it's coordinated with the group, even if it doesn't have anything to do with violence, is illegal under the material support laws if it's, you know, held to be coordinated with one of these designated terrorist organizations. So that's a huge problem, and we've seen so many, in my work, we've seen so many material support prosecutions of people who were peaceful, and one of the most significant cases is the Holy Land Foundation case, and this was the largest Muslim charity in the United States, and it raised money for charity all across the U.S. and after disasters they would give money, you know, if there was a hurricane or something. They would also give money to support people in Gaza or, you know, in the West Bank who desperately needed this aid, and they were Palestinian themselves. But they were very careful, and when these material support laws happened, they actually wrote to the government and said, look, we're not giving money to any designated terrorist organizations. We're giving money, we're raising money for peaceful purposes, and we're giving it to these Zakat committees in Gaza, which distribute the aid that comes from all over the world. It comes from the International Red Cross. It comes from the United States government, the Agency for International Development, right? And they're giving the money that they raise to the same groups that these other groups give to. And the government didn't respond, didn't say whether they would be in trouble for doing that or not. And then eventually they were charged with material support for their work, which was always known to be completely peaceful. But the argument was that these Zakat committees were somehow controlled by or entwined with Hamas, and that therefore this completely peaceful aid was supporting Hamas and therefore was illegal. The first trial was a mistrial, and then the second trial they got convicted. Most of them, there were 5 of them that got convicted, I believe. There's 3 that are still incarcerated. One only has another year or so. But the 2 leaders of it, who are the most wonderful people I've ever met, Shukri Abu Bakr and Ghassan Lashi, they were sentenced to basically life sentences, 65 years in prison. And they were, you know, middle-aged at the time. So this is life sentence for them. And they're wonderful humanitarians. I get emotional talking about it because I'm in contact with Shukri a lot, and he's been harassed a lot in prison since October 7th. So there's a huge Muslim exception to free speech and to charity and things like that, and free association. Another case that I'll just mention quickly was Tariq Mahana, and he's not even Palestinian, but it was another use of the material support laws against free speech, because one of the things he did was he translated some Arabic, I think it was really old Arabic, I don't know what it was, but he translated something from Arabic into English and put it on the internet, and somehow it was claimed to be related to jihad, and he supported, armed resistance to some things the U.S. were doing, was doing around the world in Iraq and Afghanistan. But basically the argument by the government was that, well, okay, he's not coordinating with a designated terrorist organization, but he's putting this stuff on the internet and people can download it from that organization, so that's good enough to be coordination. No, I don't think so, but then they had this other theory about he had a trip to Yemen, but they don't know what happened there, so they threw that in there, so it was a little bit muddled. So we don't know what the jury found. So on appeal, it was challenged that how can you say that he could be convicted for putting stuff on the internet and claiming that that's coordination with an organization that he's not actually coordinating with, but it got upheld on appeal, his conviction. Luckily, he got, I think, 17 years. He's in a halfway house now. He's getting out this month, it's August. But and he's a really strong guy. He's been working with Cage in the UK. But anyway, so even what the Supreme Court said in the Humanitarian Law Project case, it's been stretched even beyond that, right? Because you have the Holy Land case, they weren't even giving to a designated terrorist organization. You have the Mahana case, he's just putting stuff on the internet and not coordinating. So you can see that there's a real problem with these laws. And then we have October 7th, and then soon after October 7th, the ADL was saying that Students for Justice in Palestine should be investigated for material support violations, even though there's not evidence that they're, providing material support to Hamas or any other group. And then other than material support prosecutions, there's of course a lot of other issues with the Muslim-Palestinian exception to free speech. And we've seen a lot of, protesters get treated very harshly, and people losing their jobs, being doxxed, etc. And we have a couple examples locally. One Joe mentioned here. Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace had Miko Peled speak last December, and it caused this big uproar because of his outspoken pro-Palestine stance, and he's just coming and trying to disrupt it, even though everything he said was clearly protected under the First Amendment. And it caused BNP to be banned for a while for pretextual reasons, and then everybody fought against that, and now we have to read this disclaimer about emergency exits. Anyway, and then in Saratoga, Saratoga's had this local law which I think may be unconstitutional, but it had never been enforced until recently when there was a pro-Palestine rally on May 1st. And that law says that anybody who's planning a demonstration with 25 people or more has to file a declaration in advance. So you can't just have a spontaneous protest on the sidewalk without, anyway. So it was on the books for years and years, but it was never used until Lexis Figueiredo was charged for helping organize a pro-Palestinian rally on May 1st, and then later a Black Lives Matter rally on May 25th. And then he was the only one that was charged under it. And then there was another rally in solidarity with Black Lives Matter where we said, come on, we're violating it too. So one person who helped with that was arrested under it also, and I was in court for her this morning. And ironically, it seems that it was Tim Cole, the public safety supervisor, who is behind wanting to enforce this law now, and he was the lead FBI case agent in the case of Yassin Aref and Mohammed Hussein that got me into all this in the first place. So craziness. So we're challenging that law in court. But basically, all this shows that there's a climate of repression, since 9/11 and then especially since October 7th. But the strong support for Gaza and support for a ceasefire and cutting off funding to Israel seems to have taken many supporters of Israel by surprise, and they're fighting it like crazy. I think they will fail, and this crazy stuff that they've been doing lately, killing the negotiator that they're negotiating with, anyway, but we're going to see more repression in the meantime, but they will fail and we will prevail.
Yeah, why don't you sit back there? Is this thing on? I thought it was a minute
Yeah,
ago.
it is.
Okay, I'm going to try to put it next to my computer so we can hear Jody Dean, who will be next. Just in the way of introduction, Jody is a professor at Hobart University. She can tell you more. I'm not sure what she teaches actually. But she, for some of her writings in support of Palestine, she was suspended. She, of course, is not the only one in the country where this is happening to, as people all around the country and all around the world have come out in massive numbers to protest the genocide that we're just witnessing, you know. Not all of us are witnessing if you don't look in the right places, because in the last 2 months they really haven't covered anything about it on the U.S. Media. But people have screens in their pockets. You know, I don't know why they want to get rid of TikTok. It's because that's how a lot of young people are learning, seeing firsthand the incredible violence, genocide, brutality that is happening in Gaza like never before. So the world is finding out to be Zionism is being exposed. U.S. imperialism is being exposed like never before, and people have come out. And the character of the movement, those of us who have worked in the movement for years and years, witnessed this very recently, that people are coming out like never before. We've been able to hold mass demonstrations, tens of thousands of people all over the country in various places. By the way, the next one will be, if you can get to Chicago at the Democratic Party National Convention, there's going to be tens of thousands of people protesting for Palestine. Some of us in this room will be there. And if you would like to join us, please do so and let me know, and I can help you. 900 students, campuses throughout the country rebelled like we haven't seen since 1970, when the Vietnam War was happening. Campuses held protests, encampments. They camped out on the quadrangles and other areas in the campuses. And this is what colleges and this is what libraries are supposed to be about: freedom of speech. Unless, of course, you're in Florida, then perhaps it isn't. But it's what they're supposed to be about. 900 students were arrested during those attacks. A number of people could not graduate because of what they did. And I know a number of them personally. I don't know one that said he would change or she would change what they have done. They understand that this is a historic moment. So one of these people, it's not just students, it's professors and teachers like Jody Dean. It's even college presidents. We witnessed college presidents from some of the major colleges in the country, Yale, Harvard, Columbia, dragged in front of McCarthyite committees in Congress. And many of them were forced to resign because they would not stop, or they did not stop the protests, even though some of them professed to be pro-Zionist and wanted to stop them. But this is what's happening in the country now, and I am going to try to put the microphone next to my computer and see if we can hear Jody. So Jody, would you like to talk, and I'll see if we can get you, but hang on for 1 second. I'm going to...
Can you plug the speaker of the computer directly into the into your into the amplifier?
I don't think so.
Used to have those little plugs to do that at Radio Shack.
Yeah, I know, but I don't have one of those. Do people know where the speaker is? Hold on, Jody. Yes, I can hear you, but I'm looking for the speaker, and I think it's... I don't know. Could you try speaking, and we'll see what happens?
If I have the right
Can you hear me now?
quarter.
Okay, let's be quiet, and we will listen to Jody. Go on, Jody.
So, are we doing testing or am I starting?
Is the microphone even working?
It is very quiet. Let's turn the noisemakers off.
Speaker go. Yeah,
Could you turn that off? Even if you have to unplug it?
You have your speaker at 100%.
Yeah, he's got it.
Can folks hear me in the back?
What? Can you do something about this, do you think?
I will take a look at it.
All right, Jody, we're going to put you off and let the other speaker happen, if that's okay with you.
That's fine with me.
And someone else is going to try to do this better than I'm doing.
Okay, sounds good.
Something is coming out of that. And I'm going to see if I can turn this up higher. All right, Leslie, would you introduce Nicholas?
I'd like to welcome all of you. I am thrilled that we are celebrating, if that's the correct word, being together in this room, which we have fought tooth and nail to... Thank you. Can you hear me now?
I don't think that's on.
Not on. Anyway, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Try the mic.
The mic isn't working.
Is it working?
Oh, no.
Senior moment, no, senior life. Anyway, I'm so happy to see everybody here and to be reunited for this ongoing, wonderful, terrible, horrible situation that we are trying to change, eradicate, whatever we can do. It is continuing and it is heartbreaking every day. But I'm so happy to see all of you here. And I'm very happy to introduce my grandson. He started out as a little boy coming to, I told him I'd not embarrass him, but I'm going to embarrass him. When he was a little boy, he used to come and help me set up our potluck suppers at the church in Delmar. And that was when he was quite young. And then he did this unfortunate thing and he grew up. But anyway, he grew up and he has actually participated in 2 other forums here, one on peace and one after the shooting in Florida. And he and a friend did a panel on guns and violence in schools. So anyway, Nicholas is a recent graduate from New Paltz, and he just graduated and he's going to be going to get his master's here in Albany. So he's going to tell us about what happened on his campus and the encampments and the arrests and everything that he witnessed. And he tried to document a lot of them while they were going on. So again, thank you all for being here. And we'll move on and hope that we get the Jody Dean thing working. And I'll give you back the mic.
Okay, I think we're getting the mic back, so I think we will...
I think the way the mic sounds now, you might try it
Yeah.
with the computer.
Now your mic's on. It wasn't before.
All right, let me just see. Jody, would you try talking again?
You want to just go
Or
around?
can you hear me now?
You gotta go around.
Try it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna, if you don't mind, we're gonna have Nicholas speak and then you. So you get to end the whole thing before we have questions and discussion. Nicholas.
Thank you. Thank you, high-tech person.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Hello. I'm Nick, as you all know. I'm a graduate from SUNY New Paltz. I am currently enrolled in master's program at Albany for social work, and I'm just going to be going over the events that I went through when I was experiencing the SUNY New Paltz encampment, which realistically was not talked about as much as some of the other ones, but I think just as relevant things had happened that day as on any other campus. So the encampment itself was beautiful. It was set up on Wednesday. I think this was still in April. It was April 30th. Does it have 31 or 30 days in April? That, yes. So it was set up at the very end of April, and the school itself actually allotted us a period of 3 days to have this encampment and to basically just demonstrate what we believe should be happening for Palestine. So we have a couple pictures here of the encampment, and this was run by students and faculty across the campus. And it was relatively small. I participated in it loosely beforehand, just stopping in, greeting a couple people. But I wasn't really involved with it until the night of May 2nd, which is when our campus basically revolted against our school, which threatened academic action to take place if we did not shut down the encampment, which we were getting ready to take down tents to actually close the encampment until we had several vans of state troopers come and enforce the school's decision. And the students and faculty at the encampment had other ideas. So the night of May 2nd, we had lines and lines of state troopers dressed in gray suits. I don't want to say they were dressed in rag gear, but they had the shielded helmets, and they made a wall trying to press us off of the central quad of our campus. And it was here where things just started to escalate, I suppose. I wasn't aware of everything that was going on until me and my roommate noticed that there were helicopters flying overhead. And then we looked outside, we saw, it was crazy, hordes of drones flying in across our campus, surveilling the area. Just, it was really crazy to look at. And then one of our friends from a different dorm said, "Hey, do you see what's going on in the quad currently?" And we were like, "No." So we all decided to group up and make our way over there. And we were greeted with state police and hundreds upon hundreds of other students that shared the same ideals that we did, where this seems very unfair, unjustified, and outright cruel what they were doing at some points. And it was about probably 11 p.m. when SWAT teams and K-9 units were actually called on our campus. You can see a little bit in the line. Ooh, I get to use a laser. Right here, and here, and here. I'm not sure if the picture is zoomed in enough, but these are fully kitted out officers in riot gear. Behind them, K-9 units, and in front of them, surrounding this tree, were approximately 30 students, linked arms, basically being the last line of what our encampment was. And it was here when this line of officers began to advance and make their way closer and closer towards the students, grabbing them and ripping them away, pinning them on the ground, having K-9 units circle them, zip tie them, and bring them off to vans and others. Basically, their HQ of sorts that was set up at our mental health facility on campus. Isn't that ironic? It was, to say the least, very scary at the time. I had never experienced anything like this, and I really did not know that something like this could really happen. Up until this event, I was very blind, blissfully naive to everything that was going on in Palestine, and this really opened my eyes as to what we as a country, I guess, were trying to do when all we wanted is just for people to not be killed in the name of nothing. Because at this point it doesn't seem like they have a very good answer for why this is all going on. But I do have, and I don't know how this will work exactly, but I do have a couple of videos highlighted just from what we experienced on the campus. Please don't be super loud. Oh, you guys can't even hear it anyways. So basically this is just videos of me and my friend, my roommate at the encampment, and basically how everything resulted. It was intimidating. We stood there from about 9 p.m. till 2 a.m. until eventually it ended up in a charge where the police separated the encampment into two groups and then proceeded to chase one of them off the quad into a different area of the campus and proceeded to arrest, I believe it was 76 students. A lot of whom I were closely associated with, and it was very, very difficult just seeing a lot of my friends' faces being just put up behind that very, very menacing white background. I'm not sure if I can maybe skip to one of the areas. Over here, we were actually walking one of our friends home because they were absolutely terrified of trying to go across campus by themselves. And we stumbled upon their HQ, and we saw, everything disappeared. We saw all 76 students placed on their knees, one by one, each of them being taken for a mugshot, right basically in front of us. And then we began to hear yells and screams, and we were concerned, but we had no idea what was going on until the next morning, where we found out that there was actually a around 70-year-old woman who was hospitalized due to the aggression of the officers that were at the encampment, as well as another student. So it was a little traumatizing going across that, just in general, experiencing everything there. And I talked to a couple other people, and I'm not sure, maybe some of you can correct me, but I am, at least at the time of May 2nd and May 3rd, there were no other encampments that had canine units or the kind of aggression that New Paltz faced specifically at this time. So it was just jarring to see the kind of experience that our government or our whatever is in charge here, whatever they wanted us to experience as students, exhibiting peaceful protests, just trying to speak our minds, say that everything that is going on over in Gaza is absurd and wrong. This is the kind of message that we are greeted with on our or at least it was on my front door, basically. Yeah, and I'm assuming afterward I will answer more questions if people are interested in more in-depth about this experience. But I would like to pass it on to Jody.
Thank you, Nicholas. All right, Jody, we have the microphone working. Let me see how we get you up there. Okay. I think as you speak, you will get on more onto the screen. So, Jody, Jody, here you go.
Okay, so can people in the back hear me? Can you raise your hands if you're hearing me? Yay! Okay, awesome, great. I'm really happy to actually be able to, speak last, having heard the powerful experience from Nick and how the impact it had on him, and the utterly frightening stories of the Palestinian exception around material support from Kathy Manley. They're really powerful. I also think today, my understanding is that it's the 300th day of the current version of Israel's genocidal assault on the Palestinians. It's 300 days. And I wanted to just remind us of some of what we know. Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Everyone okay? Okay, good. At this point, over 40,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. I think many of us are also familiar with the Lancet report that covers the projected deaths that would also include deaths from disease and starvation and denial of care, a contaminated environment, food. Their estimates go up to 186,000. On this 300th day since this current escalation of the Nakba, all of the universities in Gaza have been bombed or destroyed. 80% of the schools, 165 journalists have been killed, 32 of 36 hospitals have been destroyed. The central archives have been completely destroyed, and 13 libraries have been destroyed. So we're seeing in real time the genocide of a people, their land, their culture, their heritage, their ability to create knowledge and store knowledge and preserve knowledge about themselves and their lives and their culture. And in addition to the horrible loss of life. So we're seeing unfold before us this basically kind of unimaginable horror. At the same time, we have also, and we've got to hold on to two contradictory things, we have also seen a reinvigoration of the international anti-imperialist left that hasn't been around for at least 30, maybe 40 years. The outpouring of solidarity across the, essentially across the world has been phenomenal, exemplifying and furthering a dramatic change in consciousness. Joe already mentioned this in the United States, how much consciousness is changing, how much we've moved from a situation where no one can speak about Palestine to where people say every day, don't stop talking about Palestine, where we see every day protests in some part of the world, in our communities or in Yemen or someplace else. We see them every day. This movement of solidarity is inspiring, and it's great. It's going to be what it takes for basically for liberation around the world in an imperialist era on a planet where the climate's changing. So this is an important movement because it's actually really a movement of basically of everyone against imperialism. So again, I just want to emphasize that we have to hold on to two things at the same time: the horror of the genocide and the inspiring global moment of solidarity with the Palestinian liberation struggle. And it's not easy to hold on to both at the same time, right? We can easily get lost, and I think many of us can see our friends, maybe even ourselves from time to time, get absorbed in the horror part. Or we can get almost act as if, oh, well, the exhilaration means it's all been worthwhile. That's also not the right way to go about it. We just have to hold on to the two sort of horns of this contradiction. Now, as everyone here knows and has really experienced, the Zionist and the imperialist who are carrying out the genocide are deeply, deeply threatened by the change in consciousness. Right? They're afraid. That means we've got some power. You in Bethlehem have power. Your library group has power in that you were able to continue the struggle for free speech in your library and actually learn. And I also think that the part that's also really meaningful and powerful to keep in mind is that by having to have the ongoing struggle, you contributed to the consciousness raising. You contributed to the expansion of knowledge and information about Gaza. People may not have noticed it if they didn't see it happening in their own community, or they may have let it slide. They might not have had to pay attention if it weren't for your efforts to fight for free speech around Palestine in your area. The situation was actually fairly similar from what's happened to me at Hobart Wayne Smith colleges in Geneva, New York. It was the fact that I was suspended that actually drew more attention to the stuff that I wrote. So in brief, on April 9th, an essay that I wrote called Palestine Speaks for Everyone was published on the Verso publisher. It's published on the Verso blog. Verso is my long-term publisher. I've published 4 books with them, and they run. I mean, it's a left-wing press with offices in London and New York. They also are affiliated with New Left Review, and they publish a blog with kind of occasional pieces by their authors. And so I wrote a piece, Palestine Speaks for Everyone, and then a few days after it was out, the Zionist blogs, or Zionist sort of Twitter went nuts about it and doxed me. I mean, I'm sort of not a private person, but they started targeting the president and where I teach. His name is Mark Guerin. They started targeting his social media and then every bit of the college's social media, from the alumni websites, the sports teams website, and the or social media accounts, and then to the social media accounts of the brand new capital fundraising campaign that had launched actually that day. So the Hobart and William Smith College president reacted very badly to this, and the day after all of this stuff was breaking loose on Twitter, he condemned me in a faculty meeting before the entire faculty, and then saying what I wrote was repugnant. And then the day after that, a Saturday, he essentially read me the letter of condemnation that said I was suspended from the classroom. Now I'm a tenured full professor. I've been teaching at Hobart William Smith for 30 years. To remove a tenured faculty member from the classroom is like the second highest punishment that you can get. The highest is to be completely fired, which is harder to do with tenure. But to remove someone from a classroom without any process is a really big deal. And not only did he do that, but he sent an email to every student, parent, faculty member, staff member, and alumni from the colleges. So this then circulated very quickly in social media spaces, kind of even sort of going viral in a way. And at this point, though, I started getting I got a lot of hate messages, pretty awful, like, rape threats and this kind of stuff. But then I started getting great messages, which is like, oh, Jody Dean, I'm so glad you've been suspended because I never would have come across your article, and it's really important and I'm glad you read it. Thank you for writing it. And so I got lots and lots of those. And then it was translated into multiple languages, and it's been very rough and all of this. But in fact, the sort of mind, I I was relieved. I'm not suspended anymore. I learned like 2 weeks ago that I'm back in the classroom, so that's good. But, and it sort of sucked when it was happening. The sort of small prosecution that I endured actually enabled more people to see something and read something than they would have before. It also created an opportunity for many people who hadn't been involved in political struggle to actually be active, right? So it opened up new kinds of activism. For example, students came together and wrote a letter on my behalf. Students organized themselves to confront Mark Guerin, the president, in a meeting. Like over 200 students came to this, and they questioned him, but they organized themselves on this. Many people who would never write, not the kind of people who would write letters to the editor or go to a protest, started writing letters to the HWS administration and to me as a way of showing, it wasn't about me, it was saying that we support free speech and we think it is right to speak about Palestine. So people had opportunities to be active who might not have ever been active before. And I think as we think about how the movement for Palestinian liberation grows and expands in the United States, we can't kind of overlook or take for granted the ways that we can give more and more people opportunities to be political and to express their politics and to express commitment that they might not have had. Like, not everybody is going to organize a speaker series. Not everybody's going to protest. Not everyone's going to make a banner. But some people might write letters, or they might sign a petition, or, as happened with in many universities, as a lot of us know, they might come out and support students. Right? A lot of, honestly, there are a lot of academics who talk a lot, and they talk a good radical game, but when push comes to shove, put their heads down. And we saw that. We've seen this in the Palestine struggle, people not standing up. However, when the student encampments were shut down in many universities, faculty did stand up. They stood up for their students. They stood up against the administrators using bizarre regulations to shut down the encampments. They stood up against administrators who called in police against their own students. So so even if they're not sort of like, defenders of Palestine, the fact that they would defend their students tells us how the movement can grow and bring in people because of their own other commitments to something. And that's important because often people on the far left kind of dismiss liberals as like, oh, well, they're too late to the cause. That's completely incorrect. We have to embrace everyone who comes in because every level of the struggle is really crucial and really important. And in fact, the denial of truth, the denial of free speech is one of the ways that that the imperialists and the Zionists are trying to fight against us. Right? They're fighting on the grounds of truth, on the grounds of knowledge, and on the grounds of feeling. I'm going to say a little bit more about this part. I mean, it's really quite incredible to see the degree of repression of speaking basic facts, right? Talking just about the truth of the Nakba, the truth of the occupation, the truth of apartheid. That's considered a threat. And we come up against this issue where I think I'll just use the example back of Hobart William Smith. The colleges kept saying, well, we're in favor of free speech. We just don't want students to feel unsafe. And I expect I think that sounds similar to what was happening in Bethlehem. It's like, this isn't really restricting free speech. It's trying to protect kind of community safety and make sure that everyone feels welcome or feels okay. And I think that we've got to keep working on our strategies for dealing with this kind of argument that says that, oh no, we agree with you on free speech. We're totally 100%, but it's about something else. It's about safety. It's about making sure that that everyone feels comfortable. And I hope that in our Q&A we can maybe brainstorm sort of different ways of confronting these arguments. I think I've got at least two ideas. I'm interested in seeing what you all think. And one is just pointing out the reality of there's a genocide happening, and that is not happening here in the United States for the people who are saying, I'm unsafe, right? The people who are saying I'm unsafe, they are not victims of a genocide. They are typically community members who don't like what we're saying, right? Or they're students who don't want to have views that they have challenged. But they are not victims of a genocide. So I think pointing out the basic fact is over 40,000 people have been killed. What are you talking about? That might go far. I think a second way that might go far is emphasizing the difference between, and it's kind of a variation on the first one, but emphasizing the difference between a subjective feeling about something and the reality of something. Like, that I feel nervous, doesn't mean that, I don't know, that y'all or everybody else, whoever I'm talking to, that they're making me feel nervous. That my feelings are coming from inside me. That I might feel afraid, I don't know, like walking outside my house at night, that's on me, right? That's not on everybody else. And I need to address, why do I feel this way? So I think so another way potentially of combating the emphasis on safety, the emphasis on discomfort is reminding ourselves, reminding everyone that your subjective feelings are yours. They come from you, and that's something for you to work on, not a matter of shutting down a library or suspending college professors or shutting down encampments. The student encampments, almost every place in the country, were sites of diversity, of tolerance, of embracing and learning from each other's differences. There were not good reasons for people to be afraid of these encampments, right? So to point out the obvious, that your subjective feeling is not the same thing as the reality of everybody else, could be useful in addressing these safety concerns. So again, to sum up, my basic point is we're in a position where we have tremendous horror and a new, rising, rebuilt anti-imperialist movement. We have these at the same time, and we have to hold on to both sides. The perpetrators of the genocide, which I think we all have to say the United States is one of them, the perpetrators of the genocide and supporters of the genocide want to defeat and combat the growing anti-imperialist movement. They want to defeat and combat the change in consciousness. And one of the ways they're doing this is by attacking our free speech and attacking our feelings of strength, our feelings of solidarity. They're trying to attack that, and we can't let them. Right? I think in many ways that the more we fight back and show people we're fighting back, the more likely we can win, in part because we're not letting the censors get inside us. We're not self-censoring. We're not saying, oh no, I can't say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, because that's anti-Semitic, because it is not, and we know that it's not. And in fact, we all have to embrace by the thousands, by the millions, we are all Palestinians, because Palestine speaks for everyone, and because this is a fight that goes all over the world as a fight against imperialism as well. So these are my takeaway points, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much, Jody. I wonder if Nicholas and Kathy want to come up here, and Pippa, could you bring one other chair here, and I'll move this over here so that they can sit here and I can hold the microphone for Jody. Jody, just so you could see the room for a minute, because you only see half the room from what the other thing is. But that's your audience.
Could Jody speak up a little bit, maybe, now that the room is going to be open? Could she turn up her volume a little bit more?
I don't think we can. That's the problem. That's one of the we have a technical problem. I've been holding the mic forever.
Asking if we could still hear her, that's all.
Okay, so
The speakers are on the bottom of the computer now. So if you
Okay.
lift up the computer and put the mic under, you might get better sound.
I will try that, thank you. Questions, discussion, questions and answers? Okay, we'll do here, I'll see if I can, how far I can bring the mic. I'm not sure I can bring it very far.
I have a loud voice.
Yeah, Terry has a loud voice.
Yes, all right. You're talking about the how the Palestinians have been scapegoated. I remember back when 9/11 happened, when the day the towers were hit, there was already rumors running through the state capitol where I was working, like, oh, the Palestinians did this. My response at the time was, whoever has done this in the name of the Palestinian people is no friend of the Palestinians. But now, my wife goes to Silver Sneakers. The only place they have that is at the Jewish Community Center. So I just found out this past week, because I get email from the Jewish Community Center, that there is a big pro-Israel rally planned for this Sunday in Washington Square Park with music and flag wavings and at 1:30 p.m. And I don't know if anybody knows about this, but I feel it's something that should be confronted. And I hope that, they're planning something peaceful. I hope that, if any of us do it, it's my wedding anniversary. I don't know if I can get there, but I want to be there. And, that people, that we confront it peacefully. All right. Nobody knows I'm making this. I don't know if anybody else knows about this happening, but it's Washington Park this Sunday, August 4th.
Thank you. Let's see if there's other people have questions or comments, and then we can get some comments from the speakers.
During the encampment, did the university president or somebody appear and try to lay down the rules or anything?
We received...
Hold on. Why don't we just see one more question, and then just see if other people want to say anything.
I didn't really ask a question.
That's okay. A comment is fine too. Anybody else before we see what speakers have to say? All right. Think while the speakers are asking, because there's a lot to talk about here.
So as far as our president, we received numerous emails over the night, basically addressing the encampment, stating that it is being dissolved for the safety of our students, which was talked about by some of our other presenters, which we all know is, lack of a better term, it's BS for what they were trying to push for their agenda. But our president was not on our side, made many statements basically just diminishing our students and the staff that were at the rally, and just not showing support for us. We were definitely on our own in that sense, which definitely made things a little bit more difficult. Just as far as what he was trying to convey to us, it was that we were not welcome on the campus that we pay to be on. For lack of a better way to say it, and I think he knew he was in the wrong, because when it came graduation, he said that we graduated and then left promptly. So, again, not sure if it was a decision that he made or if it was a decision from higher up, but in the end, he is the person that said it. And I would also like to point out the idea of individuality. We are all human beings. We are autonomous, and we have the ability to make decisions, which is great. That's why we are the dominant species on this planet. The idea that we cannot say no. We have to follow rules. We have to do as we are told. Are lies, and they are concepts that are made up by the people that want to keep us dumbed down. We have the power to say and do things whenever we want to. Every officer that was at the encampment, they had an opportunity to say no. Everybody who has committed acts, whether it has been in terms of genocide or even arresting students, there's always a choice that is being made, and if they say that they are doing it for the sake of themselves, for the sake of their finances, for the sake of their family, it is a poor excuse for the kinds of atrocities that have been going on. Point blank, period. We are all people, we all can make decisions, and purely because there is a big man on top telling us that this is the decision we should make, shouldn't be the deciding factor for the decision we end up making.
Jody, do you want to add to that, or should we get some more questions?
Let's get some more questions.
Okay, other questions, discussion? One here, one there, and one in back. I don't know that the mic's going to reach.
You're done.
So if you speak up, and if we need to repeat for Jody's sake, I will do that.
Why don't people come up to the mic?
Oh, why don't you come up? Why don't the three of you come up? Good idea.
That's why we're all together.
We don't want to make rules here, right?
Yeah, that's just what I would like to address, and Nicholas just brought it up, about the individuality being very, very important. My question is, you recognize that? Okay. And there are legal standings for having the demonstrations, which is probably not covered because of the chaotic situation in which it happened. But I know very well in Ulster County, you have a lot of good friends and very, very important friends with New Paltz. I mean, they're like 2 and 2 together. I've been kicked off of New Paltz because I haven't pursued the right friendships. And why did the students not address their local officials? The county legislature, the county executive, there are a number of people they might have addressed, successful or not. You put them on notice, and in addition, you empower yourself. That intended to be a question.
Okay, thank you. Great question. Were you next? Oh,
My hand wasn't up earlier.
okay. Would you like to comment?
I guess I wanted to ask Jody. The problem seems to be like they're always trying to erase people, either through erasing their Facebook or their Instagram, or the classrooms. And I just wanted to know what you think. What if you think there'd be an infinite number of platforms that people will have to keep retreating to, or how is that going to play out? What positive or negative outcomes you see for that?
Let's do 1 and 2. You could either speak from there or come up.
Just yell out 2 quick questions. One of them, were the students prosecuted legally at New Paltz? And the second one for Jody, is there continuing, is she being kept out of the classroom, or what is happening now?
No, she just...
It was another victory. There's 2 victories in this room. She got unsuspended. But
Hi, my question's for Jody, and it was funny, my partner and I were both jotting down notes, and we kind of have a similar question. Thinking about this concept of safety, and like the definition of safety, and what definitions people are employing at any given time. And specifically, like for example, imperialism pushes the narrative of safety, right? Safety for people in imperialist countries at the expense of people in colonized countries and people in marginalized countries. And I guess we see narratives of safety, right? Like homeless encampment sweeps for the safety of others. We see it through like many other narratives of safety. And I guess my question for you, Jody, is how do you challenge these claims of safety when they're actually invoking the same definitions or the same notions of safety that imperialism and police states already employ?
Thank you all for the questions. Why don't we see if there's any answers or discussion from any of the questions that were raised by any of the people. And Jody, would you like to make a comment first?
Yes, I'd love to. I'll start with the last one. I think that was that Heather?
No.
Oh, okay. She sounded like a friend of mine named Heather. So anyway, just in case. All right. Anyway, on the way that the safety discourse completely just reiterates the reality of imperialism, right? So it's on one we see on multiple scales the same dynamic. I think that's absolutely right. And how do we challenge it? One way I've listed a couple, but I think your framing of the question in terms of imperialism may also give us a hint. One of the ways that we can do it is by just pointing it out, that it is reiterating the terms of imperialism. Like, that's one way. I think we can also say something to the effect that, just like you said, like, safety is, it can be a relative thing. It can be like there's no absolute safety. There's no way that any of us is ever fully guaranteed that if you drive a car or fly in a plane or are in a building that could be on fire, like there's no, like perfect safety is just, it's not even like being in an incubator, because an incubator could get unplugged, right? So there's no such thing. And there's a way that the kind of fetishization of safety is like a denial of humanness, a denial of mortality, a denial of being embodied beings in community on a planet. It's a denial of life. And so that might be another way, one emphasizing how imperialism relies on this language of safety, in fact, to drive its own militarism and aggression. And this is also what Zionism does, right? That like Israel is like a completely unsafe place for the people who live there because it's constantly militarizing and creating among its own citizens a militarist, fearful, aggressive attitude. So maybe that, and then recognizing that safety itself is a problematic category because we're living beings and we can't ever be safe from everything. I also, on the question of local officials, this is like a sidebar to the real question. I think the real question was more to is it Neil? But the sidebar question is, so at Hobart William Smith, after about 2 weeks after I was suspended, students and faculty put together a forum, Free Speech for a Free Palestine. And I was not going to speak at it, but I invited some different people to speak. They were going to speak on Zoom, and then we were going to have an in-person part particularly for student organizers in the Finger Lakes region. So we were bringing together student organizers from Cornell, from Syracuse, Rochester, and Hobart Wayne Smith, a few other places. And so we had some of the speakers who were invited to speak by Zoom included Russell Rickford, who'd been suspended from Cornell for saying something very much like what I said, and then also Mohammed Abdu, who was visiting professor at Cornell, who was called out by the president of Cornell, was it Monique Shafouch, in her congressional hearing, and he heard his name. And that made him been a target for all sorts of anti-Arab and anti-Islamist, anti-Muslim harassment. So we had Mohammed Abdu as one of our speakers. Well, the member of Congress, Claudia Tenney, saw an announcement for our Free Speech for a Free Palestine event and issued a press release saying that this is horrible. We're having an anti-Semitic terrorist rally, and it was not a rally. It was an academic forum, Free Speech for a Free Palestine. But her press release about this anti-Semitic rally with known terrorists got picked up by right-wing forces in the area, who then started making threats. And then this got our campus safety office to say, well, you can't have this on campus for reasons of safety. It's too dangerous. So no, you cannot have an academic forum on free speech on the Hobart and William Smith College's campus. We tried to find other places in the community. No one would let us have it because they had heard about the security concerns. So this then really prevented the students from getting to talk face to face. But in terms of the sort of dialectical analysis I've been giving, in fact, we had over 140 people then on the Zoom call that replaced the in-person part, so that everybody got to meet each other, and people stayed on this Zoom discussion of free speech for like 4 hours. And the students still made really tight connections with each other across the region, and connections that continue. So the repression of it, again, backfired for the repressors, and ended up, we were able to have a different version of free speech for a free Palestine. But anyway, the connection with local officials is, in my experiences, they haven't been the most reliable elements. They've actually been doing the bidding of imperialism and Zionism. Also the question about my circumstances, it's not a total victory, though I'm telling the story as a victory. The colleges tell the story as I was found guilty of violating the college's standards of harm, but it wasn't an actionable problem, and so I can come back to teaching. So they made it clear I'm not welcome, and said that my speech on a blog post, and also I gave a public lecture about it for our group, Students for Humanitarian Justice. I gave a version of the talk, and they said, well, that did harm to some of the students who attended, though they never said what the harm was. So there's a little bit still sort of pushback, disparagement, lack of any sense of welcoming me in the community at all. So it's there, it kind of continues. Then the one last thing about the platforms, which I think is a really, really interesting question, like the social media platforms. I get a lot of my news from the, I'm going to mispronounce it, Mondoweiss. Yep. It was just really, really great. But I get the updates. I don't subscribe, I'm not a paid subscriber, but I get the updates from, Hazaret, the Israeli one. Haaretz, thank you. Because I want to know what they're saying. And in fact, they actually are to the left of the U.S. mainstream media. So I look there, and then I also look at Electronic Intifada. I think these sources, and there are other ones, various left organizations have really good articles and analyses. And these are useful. And the one thing is that when some things get censored or shut down, new things pop up. And I take a lot of hope from that. It's not like I've got hope in the internet, but I have hope in the anti-imperialist left communities, our solidarity, and people continuing to try and get out information and have discussions. Part of my, one of my lessons, I guess, I've learned with, by my writing the essay that I wrote for the Verso blog, I think I learned more about the power of our speech than I thought before, because I thought, oh, it's a left, I'm glad to write this essay, I'm happy what I wrote, but I don't expect there to be a lot of attention. It's a small, left-wing publisher, and it got a lot of attention because people were angry and outraged by it. And I think recognizing that made me feel again like I shouldn't discount what we're doing, right? It's powerful. It upsets people, and that is furthering our struggle. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jody. Let's see if other people want to answer those questions.
Well, do you want to? I'll just say on the safety thing, and then we'll go to Nick about, there was a couple of questions. Because I wasn't asked any, but I want to say something about the safety thing, because I look at it pretty simply, which is kind of how the law looks at it too in terms of harassment law. Like as Jody pointed out before, it's not just a matter of does somebody feel scared subjectively, It's a matter of, is that reasonable? Are they actually being threatened, physically threatened, right? So if somebody comes to speak and says, ooh, everybody wearing blue shirts should be rounded up and beat up. Come on, the rest of you that don't have blue shirts, let's go after those people. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's threatening, right? So that's a problem. But if you just talk about facts in Palestine or anywhere in the world, or you just talk about history, or you just talk about ideas, that is not something that should be shut down. And so that it's like a pretty basic, it doesn't seem that difficult to me, to be able to allow free speech. And then as far as, there was that young Muslim woman that was supposed to give the graduation address, and I think it was in California, and she wasn't allowed to because there were threats, right? And they said, oh, it's not safe. I mean, that's wrong too. They should either provide police protection or, you know, ask the people, well, ask her, do you still want to speak? Because she would be the one that would be threatened. I mean, so that's terrible when it happens like that too. That's, anyway, so Nick, do you want to talk about if you had any thoughts about reaching out to local officials or not, or hang on, just, because
turns reality on its head. It is Muslims in this country who have been accused of terrorism that have been victimized over and over again. In this recent period, 3 young Muslim men were shot, Palestinian men were shot in Vermont just for being Palestinian. In Chicago, an 8-year-old boy and his mother were stabbed, and the kid died just because he was Palestinian. In California, a whole family of Palestinians was run down by someone in a car just because they are Palestinians. As Kathy mentioned, there are hundreds of Muslims, because of this fake, phony war on terror, that are still in jail in the harshest conditions you can imagine. International law defines that if you are in solitary confinement more than, I think it's 18 days, it's torture. Some of these people have been in solitary confinement for decades. So, you know, there is a basis for fear. And even when we go out, you know, I know so many people who see us vigil and said, I'd like to come with you, but are afraid. It takes some courage in this country, and it is not, because we are not anti-Semitic at all, the opposite. It takes some courage, and it is really the left that's being prosecuted, the Muslim and Palestinian communities that are being persecuted. It's not the other way around, and I think we should think about that. Let me go over here.
Hi, my question is for Kathy. So, in the realm of defending Palestinian human rights and spreading knowledge regarding the current genocide, many of us have had accusations of anti-Semitism and ties to terrorism for speaking out against the Israeli government actions. The individuals and student groups on the front line of organizing events, protests, or discussions criticizing the Israeli government's violations of Palestinian human rights find themselves unfairly labeled as anti-Semitic or terror sympathizers. This happened to us here in our local newspaper after the Miko Pellet event, where everyone in this room was called a Hamas or terror sympathizer. So my question for you as a criminal defense attorney is, and I know that Joe touched on this topic as well, that pro-Palestinian and overall Muslim voices have been doxxed since 1969, as you mentioned, and you've represented numerous cases. So my question for you is, as a Muslim American who was born and raised in this country, who identifies as a proud American, do you have any advice for the Muslim community who choose to speak up to navigate this asymmetry?
Yeah, it can be tricky, right? But I mean, the more people speak up, the more people can speak up, and the more it becomes safer and the safety in numbers, right? So I work with lots and lots of Muslim activists who speak out all the time, and you just have to be a little bit careful, about, like, if you're supporting Hamas and you put it all over social media, that draws a lot of bad attention, right? So just because of the material support laws, you have to be aware of that, but there's so many things you can do that where you're totally within your rights, and they might try to come after you, but you should be able to defend yourself. And we actually, since October 7th, I was wondering if there would be an uptick in sting operations targeting like pro-Palestine activists, students, and others. And we haven't really seen that yet. Maybe people are aware of these tactics, or maybe it just hasn't happened yet because these take a while. But anyway, you got to be careful of the material support laws and sting operations. If somebody starts trying to talk you into something and it sounds sketchy, be careful. But basically, as long as you're speaking out for human rights and you're speaking out against genocide and it's not anti-Semitic, and don't let anybody try to cow you out of speaking your mind.
Jody, did you want to say something in that?
She shook her head no.
No? Okay. I'll call on some other people. Just let me recognize a few people here. First of all, Tamor, who's a lawyer who's done a lot for the Palestinian struggle in Capital District, and I'm really happy he joined us here tonight. Steve Downs, who has been a great supporter of the Palestinian struggle for a very long time. Lynn.
Tamor and Steve have been the backbone of our fight.
And they have been they've supported us on our fight. Lynn Jackson, who actually walked from Albany to Binghamton when the case was being heard of some of the Muslims in this area in Binghamton. She walked that whole distance to support them. And Jean Finley, who did so much of the writing that helped some of the Muslims here, helped them write books and so much more. These are, and Zuhair is here, and who else am I missing? I said Jean. Didn't I say Jean? Anyway, there are some real heroes in the room here that have been fighting this fight for a while. Other questions? Discussion? We have about 15 minutes to go before they told us we have to be out. And the thing I read in the beginning. Yes.
Although we are here talking about the current issue of the Palestinian, but there is a underlying force, which is the government versus against people, against the government. When I came to this country in the 60s, I was a student, and I saw the Vietnam, the people started opposing the Vietnam War, and similar things were under play, like Kent State University, 4 students were killed, and the upheaval was far larger than what we are seeing now in case of Palestinian. And you can go back to it with the history, and you find the same thing again and again. People change, but the process is same. There was at one time un-American activities, Nixon's time, where people were branded communist. University people who opposed the policies, they were branded communists, and many of them were driven out of the country. So this, and of course, the history of the African Americans is very well known. So this process really is continuous. The name stays, the government stays, but it is always there. In my childhood in India, same thing the British were doing. So it's human nature, something we have to change. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we just see if there's any last comments from everybody, and then Leslie's just going to make an announcement at the end, and then we'll break up for a while. Jody, do you have any last comments you'd like to make?
Sure. I really appreciated the last comment from from the audience regarding the continuities in U.S. history. And I think that's really important. One of the scholars who was on the Free Speech for a Free Palestine discussion that I mentioned is Therese Bergen-Stelly. And she's an expert on Red Scares in U.S. history, particularly the intersection of Red Scares and anti-Black racism. And one of the things that she brought up, is she does a lot of archival work, is how so much of what's happening right now is akin a little bit less to the McCarthy era than to the earlier era of Alien and Sedition Acts. What was that, like around the pre-1920, around 1919? And the reason she thinks it's similar is the fear of traitors, the hostility to traitors. The only difference is now all of the sort of U.S. ruling class is treating Israel as if it were the United States. And so the strangeness of the present is that criticism of Israel is worse than criticizing the U.S. So anyone can say, oh, the United States is racist, and nobody blinks an eye. But if you say Israel is a Zionist apartheid state, then you're guilty, or not guilty in a legal sense, but then you're charged with or accused of being anti-Semitic. So there's a kind of strange expansion or twist in how, the repressive apparatus of the United States is working, and that now it's applying it to Israel as if being critical of Israel were being a kind of traitor in the U.S. And I've been sort of sitting with her observation on that and thinking it's really interesting, because it's a little bit strange that criticism of a foreign country would be that stigmatized in the U.S. I wanted to bring that up. The other thing I wanted to mention is something I alluded to in my opening remarks, is about how there's a kind of policing of feeling. And this is one of the things I talk about in the Verso essay, Palestine Speaks for Everyone, which is that we are not supposed to feel particular ways. So immediately after October 7th, the permissible feeling was grief and mourning. Right? That was permitted. But it was not permitted to actually historicize the events or contextualize the events in the Nakba, the blockade, the occupation, apartheid in Israel. None of these were okay at the time. It was like, oh, no, you're supporting terrorism. You're celebrating the murder of Jews. If you bring up, you're justifying what's going on. So the acceptable things were just mourning. It was also the case that, and this is there's a long-standing practice of this. If you were going to speak, you had to begin by condemning Hamas. That you couldn't speak and be credible if you didn't condemn Hamas.
Right.
And I think that both of these are ways to try to say that we are not allowed to feel solidarity with a people fighting for their own liberation. We're not allowed to feel a kind of respect and admiration and enthusiasm for people who, against all odds, are willing to take great risk for their own self-defense and their own self-liberation. That's what I was really chastised, disciplined, condemned for, is the opening lines of my essay talk about the feeling that many people had of a kind of exhilaration of seeing the people trying to break free. And that's been impermissible, and said that that's a celebration of death and killing, which it's not. It's a celebration of a struggle for liberation. I expect that we will have to grapple with the restriction of legitimate feeling a lot in October of 2024, as different commemorations and acknowledgements of a year of this struggle will go on. And there will be some that will be considered legitimate and okay, those that are grieving the loss of Israeli life on October 7th, and some that may be rendered, inadmissible. And so it's something for us to think about as we plan in our communities and our groups about how we want to continue this struggle for free Palestine and for being able to speak freely about Palestinian liberation in the United States and our area.
Thank you, Jody. Nick, do you want to say anything? Kathy, you want to say anything?
At the same time that I'm really, really horrified by the ongoing genocide, and I like how Jody put it, that we have to hold both of the things, the genocide and really the absolute horror, that you see every day, with how people are speaking out against it all over the world and protesting, and how there's, so much more pushback against it. And I was very inspired by all the student protests, as I'm sure we all were. And some people might worry that, if they get arrested, it might somehow interfere with their career, but it probably won't. It'll probably be a badge of honor for you. Like in my case, back in the 80s, I was actually in jail on my college graduation from SUNY Albany, where we were protesting the CIA and wars in Central America and other things, and I got arrested a whole bunch of times back then, and it didn't keep me from becoming a lawyer or doing whatever I wanted to do. So don't worry about that.
Yeah, luckily a lot of the students, at least that I knew that got arrested, were working to be social workers or working to work in law, so I feel like that's probably something they can put on their resume or something. But something that I guess as a very quick closing thought, I have been listening to a podcast. It is called The Sum of Us, and it is made by a woman named Heather McGhee. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of her. She is amazing. And she talked about the idea of racism in America does ultimately hurt the target or the group that it is targeting. Her example was in the Deep South, Black Americans face incredible amounts of hardship, and she went into this example about a pipeline, oil line being established, and how it was the path of least resistance to go through a black neighborhood rather than a white neighborhood. And this idea that it made this uproar and giant protests, which inevitably led to the pipeline never being constructed. But it was a time for all populations to be united. This wasn't that it was targeted racism towards this community, but it's not the only one that was affected. This line would go through and pollute their ground, their water, everything. It would probably start crazy amounts of pollution and killing hundreds upon thousands of people through cancer and other sorts of illnesses like that. But it is also important to point out the idea that white people were also going to be affected by this. Ultimately, or I guess this wasn't in the Deep South, it was in Tennessee. Tennessee is known, I'm not sure for any of you that know, but is known for its water sources. Has a very deep and plentiful and rich, aquifer. Thank you. That was going to be polluted. So not only is this harming the black community by contaminating that whole region, but it's also going to contaminate the groundwater that everybody drinks. And I guess a closing question is the racism that Palestinians are suffering from, in what ways as us as a society are we all suffering from this hatred? And of course we can all think about the ideas of free speech being basically thwarted at this point through all the demonstrations that everybody has been doing, but I guess what other ways as a whole, as humans, as just beings on this earth, how are all of us being affected by this kind of hatred? Because in the end, it's affecting all of us. And I think the sooner we realize that, is the sooner maybe this can be, I don't want to say resolved, but at least, yes, exactly.
Thank you. Leslie, would you like to send us out?
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Thank you for our panel. It was very interesting, provided a lot of knowledge, a lot of encouragement, and again, thank you all for participating. I want to say thank you to our Muslim friends who have been coming to the vigils for a very long time, and we are so proud to stand with you every Monday night. And we hope that this will continue for a long time. Not the Gaza situation, but this friendship and the support. And it's something that we all just need to keep talking about and thinking about and finding ways to communicate with other people who don't want to talk about it or hear about it. But our vigil is very important, and we'd like to make sure everybody knows that they're invited to come on Monday nights from 5 to 6. And just one little caveat is that I was interviewed after the library lifted the sanction. I was interviewed by the Spotlight for about 32 minutes. And in the article that finally came out in the Spotlight, it was quite derogatory. So unfortunately, I will be attending one last board meeting in August. If anybody wants to come for the fun, they may. Right here in August. It's going to be the last board meeting, I think, that I bothered to attend, but I do need to correct some of the things that were said in the Spotlight. And we're going to just keep up the battle whenever we need to. We need to address wrongs. We need to address information that's incorrect. And whether people are uncomfortable or feel unsafe when I make statements at the school board, at the library board meeting, is irrelevant, because we heard that all night on the 5th when Miko Peled was here. We were called terrorist supporters and Hamas lovers and anti-Semitics and everything else, and it's just words. It's just words meant to intimidate, scare, whatever. And it didn't at all. I mean, it just made us so angry that we realized that this is a fight. We're trying to bring around a sense of community and peace, and we're accused of being terrorists, and it's just ridiculous. But the fight has been fought by everybody in this room. So again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all being here tonight and the panel. And it's wonderful to be back in this room again. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, Jody. Thanks, panelists. Yeah. And